Boker Tov. I'm not sure, Abba, if you're answering me, but your microphone is muted. So if you are saying Boker Tov, which I'm sure you are, but I'm not hearing it. So if you want to find out how to get to the mute button, if you just hover over the Zoom page, on the bottom left, there's a little button that says mute. And there's a, okay. Huh?
Yeah, I hear.
There you go. Now I hear you, Abba. Boker Tov.
Boker Tov.
Boker Tov.
Boker Tov. So who's giving the shir?
What?
I said, who's giving the shir? There's three of us.
I thought it's you. You were the first on, so it must be you.
I finished it already.
Oh,
It's something called Real Clear
well,
Daf.
now that you finished it, you could start again.
It's true, I usually can go over the whole day before in this little something called Real Clear Daf. That's good. Just cover the next daf.
Yeah.
Question is, well, by the time you wake up, the question is the time you went to sleep.
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Boker Tov. Boker Tov.
Abba, and then while the shir is going on, in order that no one will hear any noises from you, then you mute the microphone again. That's all. So, see you later.
Oh, so we are just like Twitter bugs. Uncensored Twitter bugs.
What's that?
I said we are uncensored Twitter bugs.
Oh, okay, that's a new one.
Yeah, most of our talk is just Twitter anyway.
There you go.
Like,
Tzif.
yeah, tzif.
Yeah.
But occasionally inside of tzif, someone else says there's really special messages. Oh, here we come. That man. Okay.
Hey.
Rebbe and the Marash, the Rebbe, they have steps of my it's that. Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. How are you?
Hashem. Dish tov.
So, does it sound good, Moshe? Now you have to say good things. We have the sound now. Let's see what the teichen is. this chus of our learning. Shepherd Beis Mikdash. And should be a first lema for all those that need. Lamed Vav Amud Beis. We're like 7 lines from the top. It says V'noisnen keli tachas hadelaf b'Shabbos. That's 36b, right? You can put a vessel underneath a drip or a leak to catch it on Shabbos. What was the concern? Well, we mentioned before that maybe the drip would have been muktzah, but we said no, we're dealing with the drip that's not muktzah because it's drinkable. So what would the issue be? Maybe just a tircha. Doesn't seem like such a big tircha. I don't know why it has to tell me like a basic thing. It says Tanem Nesmalia Keli. It was taught in a brisa that if the vessel got filled up, sheifech b'sheina ve'ina nimna. There's no problem to spill it out and to bring it back. You have to empty the bucket, so you can go spill it out and bring it back. It must be an issue of tircha, that you're carrying a bucket of water or something. Beirechaya da Abaya Dalaf. Abaya has a mill, and there's a leak on the roof over the mill, and it's dripping down. It's going to ruin the stones. I don't know what type of stones they use, they're plaster, whatever, but it's going to ruin it. So, Asalakami de Rabba comes to Rabba. Rabba's the teacher of Abaya, raised him as well. Amalei zil aili lapurach lahasam. Go take your bed. Bring it into the room that they do the mill, where the mill is. What's going to happen is you'll be able to move the mill. The mill is muktzah, but he wants to move the mill. Yeah, I have a more simple answer. Why don't you just put a bucket there to catch it? But that's apparently that wasn't the solution. So what you'll do is you'll move your bed into that room. Then the mill will be considered something disgusting in your bedroom, especially with the water dripping on it. And there's a rule that because of kavod abrius, you're allowed to move a chamber pot out of the room when it's full. You're allowed to move it out. So it's like slightly muktzah, right? It's not something disgusting, but for respect for humanity, you're allowed to take it out. So you'll be once you move the bed into the room, you'll be allowed to take the mill out. So Yosef Abaya v'kakashale. Abaya was sitting and he had a question on what he just heard. It says, are you allowed to turn something into a graf shel rei l'chatchila? No, it's if you have a graf shel rei, a chamber pot, you're allowed to move it out. But you don't make something into a graf shel rei and then move it out. Adahachi, while he's thinking this, nafal beirechaya Abaya, his mill collapsed. I guess it got wet. And Zamar Abaya says, Teisili Davri Adamar. I deserved it because I didn't listen to to my master, to Rabbah. Very chassidische story. Okay. Abaya was being machmer. Rabbah said he could be mekel. Yeah. Now Abaya is right. There is an issue of Eines and Graf Shel Rei L'Chatchila. But Rabbah held that because it was a loss, that it would be permissible. Amar Shmuel, that's Taisus mentions that. Shmuel says, Graf Shel Rei, Vavit Shel Mei Raglayim, Mutlei Tzion La'ashpa, Shmachzir, Nesim Mei Mayim Machzir. So Shmuel says, you're allowed to take out a chamber pot or a bedpan. You're allowed to take it out of the room, bring it out to the garbage. We're talking about a muktzah issue, not carrying, of course. And when you return it, you put water in it and you return it. So we're understanding from this, why do you need water when you return it? Well, the pot itself is muktzah, and the whole heter to move it was because it was in your room. But now you're moving it back into your room. So why would you be allowed to do it? You'd be allowed to do it because you put water in it, and the water was something that would be permissible. So Savar Minei, they understood based on this that graf shel rei agav mana in b'fnei atzmei. That's something that's actually disgusting. You're really not allowed to move. Why was I allowed to move the chamber pot out? Not because of the excrement. The excrement would be muksa, but the muksa machmasmias. It's disgusting. Something that's disgusting is muksa. But because the graf shel rei is a keli, it's a utensil that could be used for other things or something. So that's why it would be permissible. So
what about, like garbage that you have in the home?
yeah, so garbage is we had a bunch of gemaras about garbage. It's a little complex, but the heterim for garbage is that, well, like peels or stuff, well, an animal would eat those peels, a goat would eat it, or a chicken would eat it. Yeah, and then there's the graf shel rei. Is it disgusting? That could also be a leniency. But are you allowed to take it directly? They understand that you can't take it directly. So if Tashema, so come and listen. Usually Tashema is not quoted for a story of Amiraim. It's an interesting one. Dahu achbarta deshtakach be asparamki de Ravashi. They found a rat or a mouse in the spice cabinet of Ravashi. Had a perfume room. So Amul Ravashi nakte b'tzutzisa v'afkua. Take it out by its tail. Now that means that you're allowed to touch the davar mas itself. Whereas the heter of graf shel rei, there's a special heter that you're allowed to move muktzah if it's disgusting. Is not because there's a keli there, because we find by Ravashi that he instructed them to move the animal out by its tail. Yeah, I remember I asked a cockroach in the house on Shabbos. Are you allowed to like chase it out? You know, you could with a broom. You could like you open the door and you sweep it out. So you're allowed to do that. And they said it's for sure a graf shel rei, for sure. Okay. Very interesting Mishnah. Kol shechayavan ala mishum shvus, mishum rishus, mishum mitzvah, b'Shabbos, chayavan ala b'Yom Tov. 3 categories. Anything that's prohibited to do on Shabbos because it's a rabbinic prohibition, even if it has a mitzvah, a slight mitzvah involved, we're going to call that rishus. Even if it has a full mitzvah involved, we'll call that mitzvah. If you can't do it on Shabbos, you can't do it on Yom Tov, and you're chayav on Yom Tov. It's the same, it doesn't mean chayav because it's a rabbinic law. Maybe it means makas mardas or something. Okay. The word shvus is referring to rabbinic prohibitions. Rishus over here is referring to a slight mitzvah. It's almost voluntary, but there is a mitzvah involved. And mitzvah means that there's a real mitzvah. So what are these things that we're saying, even if there's a mitzvah involved, it's still prohibited? Then you can't do it on Yom Tov either. So what it's going to say here is to do a court case, to marry a woman, to do chalitza and do yibam. It's not an obligation to do it today. Right. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, so that's going to be, this is this Gemara. This Gemara is the source of that. Let's take a look at the examples. What are the rabbinic laws that are prohibited on Shabbos, which our Mishnah claims is also prohibited on Yom Tov? You're not allowed to climb a tree. Well, what's wrong with climbing a tree? Well, the rabbi said you can't do it because we're going to see, you're going to break a branch or whatever. So you can't do that on Yom Tov either. You can't ride on an animal. What's wrong with riding on an animal? It's no malacha. So, well, you might do something wrong, the Gemara is going to tell us what. Leishatan al pnei hamayim, you can't float on the water, which means swim. Le'metapchem, you can't clap. Le'mesapchem, you can't bang on your thigh. That's like for music, another type of clapping. Le'meraktim, you can't dance. Okay, all of those are shvus. You're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. You can't do it on Yom Tov. Those are all shvus. These are the ones that have the slight mitzvah involved. Leidanin, can't do a court case. Leimakadshin, can't marry a woman. Leicholzin, can't do chalitza. Leimiyabmin, can't do yibn. The Gemara is going to ask, marrying a woman is not a slight mitzvah. It's a big mitzvah. We're going to say that he already had children, or he already has another wife. He's marrying his second wife, his 50th, 70th. So there's no real mitzvah there because he's already fulfilled the mitzvah of Pru Ravu, and he's married. He doesn't have any issue. This is just extra. The Gra held that there's a mitzvah to eat. Of course, there's a mitzvah to eat matzah the night of Pesach. But what about the rest of Pesach? So the Gemara says, just like the 7th day is a rishus, mashvi rishus, afshish rishus, just like you don't really need to eat matzah the whole Pesach. If you want to eat bread, then that bread needs to be unleavened. But otherwise, you can eat whatever, broccoli, potatoes. Yeah. So the Gra held that it's not so. The Gra held that there's actually a mitzvah to eat matzah the whole Pesach. And he learns the Gemara slightly different. He says, Ma shvi rishus avshish rishus. You know what rishus means? It's a slight mitzvah based on our Mishnah. He actually says that you say a bracha, I think, ala chilas matzah, when you eat matzah the rest of Pesach. Okay. Veilu hein mishum mitzvah. The following are going to be a mitzvah. Lei makdishin v'lei marichin v'lei machrimin. You can't make something hektish. You can't do erchin. That means erkecha alai. I'll pay the value of based on your age. V'lei machrimin. You can't dedicate things to the bedek habayis. V'lei magbiyan shumas u'maiser. You can't separate shumas and maiser. This is a big topic in Masechta Beya. Kol elu b'yom tov amru kal v'chaymer b'Shabbos. These we said you can't do on Yom Tov, for sure you can't do on Shabbos. Now we conclude ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos ala eichel nefesh bilvad. The only difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos is eichel nefesh, which means things for eating. And turns out carrying, if it's carrying food. That's a machlekes Beishamai and that's Beishamai and Beisel. We'll see. Loi oilin beila, and the Gemara goes back to explain what it said in the Mishnah. You're not allowed to climb a tree. Gzeir shem yitlish. You might pull off a branch, and what happens? That's considered kaitzer, harvesting. What are you going to do with the branch? Well, you can use it for firewood, but that's considered harvesting. Anything that's removed from a tree, anything that's attached to the ground, is a malacha. You can't ride on an animal. To Gzeir, you might end up going out of the 2,000 amas that your person's allowed to go. Umar says, well, Shema mina tchumen deraisa. That would only be if tchumen is deraisa. If we see tchumen, you can't make a Gzeira on something that's rabbinic. A Gzeira, you might end up violating a rabbinic law. That's a Gzeira l'Gzeira. So there's a machlekes actually Bavli and Yerushalmi, and there's a machlekes in the Bavli if tchumen deraisa, if it's just rabbinic. So according to this, it must be that it's deraisa. The Gemara says no. You might pull off a branch and use it to guide the animal, to hit the animal. Yeah. This whole discussion today about scooters and bicycles and stuff. Yeah. There were paiskim that held that what the Gemara does over here is not the entire story. The Gemara is just giving me a reason. You see, the Gemara tried this, tries that. We know that it's usher anyway. And these reasons are just like throwing out reasons. Oh, it's this. Okay, it's not that. Okay, it's another thing. But it's not limited to those reasons. Again, it was the Chemda Shleima, I think. He said, It's a gzeira. Any device that any traveling thing is would be prohibited. I think I'm not sure if that would include a stroller, but the problem is a stroller. I think there's Gemaras that say that there's a stroller we had earlier that a baby would play with the wagon that it would go in. So yeah. Anyway, okay. Skateboard. You're not allowed to swim. There's a problem. You may make a floating device. This was something that they would use. What's the board that they hold when they kick in the pool? It teaches you how to swim. You know, it helps you practice. So you may end up taking something like that. Okay.
Which malacha is that? Having
It looks over here that it's going to be weaving. They would weave this thing together. It's made out of some material that floats, and they would weave it together, and then you would hold it. Okay, guess that's what Rashi said. That's how Rashi puts it. You're not allowed to clap, bang, or dance. Because it's a decree, you may end up making a musical instrument. Yeah, I think we had a thesis before about this. That the flamet.
going back to
It was sort of like a raft where you put one over and under, and then you just put it together like you would do with popsicle sticks and do that. So it wasn't a like getting out of the water and going to a machine and a loom, and it's probably a type of light wood or something that would float, and you would just put a few together and you would hold on to it.
just teach your kids to swim.
Yeah, that's a Gemara condition. So if you have to teach your kids to swim, so then you should swim on Yom Tov because that's the only time you're home. And then, okay. You can't do a judgment. 1 second, a judgment is a mitzvah. It says we're talking about a scenario where there's a judge that's more higher or more better. So therefore, it's not really the mitzvah. You don't have to do it. You pass it on to the one you could avoid it. You could let the better judge do it. Okay. You can't get married. When I ask a question about mitzvah covered, that's a mitzvah to get married. It's this week's parsha, actually. It's very harsh language. Someone that doesn't get married, it doesn't attempt to have children. So it says leitzricha disla yishovanim, talking about that he already has children. How many children? According to Beis Shammai, he has 2 male children, and according to Beis Hillel, it's a male and female, a boy and a girl. Now, the truth is that there is a mitzvah to have more children, even after that. The Gemara Yavamas. The Gemara talks about that Rabbi Akiva, even after he had 24,000 students, he still made another 5 students afterwards. And so too, even if you had children when you were younger, you should have more when you're older. It's a slight mitzvah. It's not like the big mitzvah, but it's okay. Like cholzin v'le miyavmin, you can't do chalitza or.
You might come to seem very, very arbitrary.
We're talking about in the courthouse.
Okay, we might have to write a document, you might make a kingdom, there's a lot of things you can do wrong at a wedding.
Yeah. Actually, what's the issue here is the document. The issue is the document. We just said, why are you calling it a mitzvah? We were challenging the category. We thought it was in the wrong category.
every single thing you do, I can find it. Well, you should do it because my company is somebody else.
Right.
So it seems Kumar does this all the time. It seems somewhat arbitrary.
Right.
Kumar
The
does.
idea is- the
Kumar
things
does
might
all
come to do. I want to send this much. Don't worry.
So I don't know if in this society it was more that this was going to lead to that, and they've seen it happen, so they made the decree. And nowadays we look at it like, really, I'm going to break off a branch. So, or if Chazal know that this is, so it could be like we were saying before that Chazal said you can't do it for whatever reason, and they could tell you a reason, break off a branch or whatever. They give you a reason just to satisfy people. But the Gra held like that. It's my second Gra. He held that we don't know the reasons for the takanas of the Chachamim. Whatever they told us is not really the full reason. Now that says, 1 second, but you're doing a mitzvah. Chalitza, yibam, that's a big mitzvah. So it says, we're talking about a case where there's an older brother. And the truth is, mitzvah begadol yavim. V'kulu taimamai. What's the reason for all of these things that you're saying that they're forbidden? Because you may end up writing the document.
This says you can't marry. Because what? Wiring.
Yeah.
Goes through a whole bunch of
Sure.
different things.
Yeah. Well, where are you reading that from? Mitzvah covered. Yeah, but what's wrong with the Kenyan? Why? Because of writing, because of the document. It's all based on the document. Does it? Oh. Well, there was no. You can't avoid what the Gemara is saying. It's a decree that you might write. Yeah. What there was something called Maimar by Yibam. Mamar. It was like an initial kedushin that was done for Yibam, and I don't know what that entailed. Look, we don't need a document either for marriage. That's just a ksuba. That's a monetary thing, but we have rabbinic laws that tell us about that document, but not that's not the marriage. Okay. The following, even though they're a mitzvah, you're not allowed to do them on Yom Tov. You can't consecrate items. You can't do erechin, which is to give the value of someone. What this Tosfos is discussing is, let's say the person didn't have. This Tosfos was discussing. Let's say the person didn't have. He didn't have children yet. So would he then be allowed to get married on Yom Tov? And that seems to be a machlekes. That seems to be a discussion, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Okay. So erechin is erkelei machrimin, is to give something to the bedek abayis. All of this is gzeir shemeka chumemka. This is a decree because of business, of buying and selling, which that itself is an issue. Two pshatim in Rashi. Rashi's first pshat is it's a from the Nevi'im. It says it's not Shabbosdik. Inami, Rashi says that you're going to end up writing. Rashi has a question. If that's the case, it's gzeira l'gzeira. You're not allowed to consecrate items because that's similar to changing changing possession of something is similar to buying and selling. Buying and selling is only prohibited because you might end up writing, that's 2 steps removed. It's He says, no, it's Kula Chad Gzeir. When the sages instituted that you're not allowed to buy and sell, they also instituted that you can never change Rishus, which would include consecrating items.
You just said the first part is less than the time.
Mina Mikra, right? No, it doesn't mean a deraisa. That means Mina Mikra from the pasuk in the prophets. In Tzeichevtzcha and Yeshaya. No. Yeah. It's like Purim. Shalach Manas, V'lei magvian Chumas and Maisris. You're not allowed to separate Chumas and Maisris. Pshita. I'm a little surprised by that Pshita. It's so clear that it's misaken the foods. I guess that's that. I mean, we've been learning this a whole bunch of times, but okay. Tanu Rabbi Yosef leinitzcha. Oh, 1 second. Leinitzcha ela litnin l'kaim by bayim. The chiddush is the opposite. Let's say you go to the kayin with your truma and you hand it to him. Now it's not really clear that what you just did was fixing your foods that you want to eat, or did you give him a meal for Yom Tov? Maybe he needs food. He needs food, so you gave him food. You're not allowed to give a guest some food. He happens to be a kayan. Forget about what I have in my storage that I just needed to fix. But over here, this really looks like you're giving it to him directly. Here, go ahead, take a bite. So maybe it's not fixing what you have back home. So that's the chiddush. This whole issue of being misakin the food, fixing the food by taking Chumas and Maisros, that's only if I was supposed to do it yesterday, and I didn't do it yesterday. But something that became tevel just today. Tevel means that it wasn't fixed. For example, dough, which I'm allowed to do on Yom Tov. I'm allowed to make bread, fresh bread on Yom Tov. So, and when I make fresh bread, I have to take challah. So, you're allowed to separate the challah and give it to the kayan. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to discuss what's going on in this Mishnah. You just told me a bunch of things that have a rabbinic prohibition on them. And you said that some of them have a rabbinic prohibition, some of them have a mitzvah, and some of them are a slight mitzvah, some of them have a full mitzvah. The Gemara says, "V'hani mishum reshusik and mishum shvus leka." The ones that you just told me, they don't have a rabbinic prohibition as well. V'hani mishum mitzvah and mishum shvus leka. All three categories have the rabbinic prohibition, but only the first category was called rabbinic prohibition. But all three of them have it. Rav Yitzchak says that it's coming not only this, but even this. And not only are you not allowed to do a rabbinic prohibition alone that has no mitzvah attached to it, the rishus nami asur. But even if there is a slight mitzvah attached to it, you're still not allowed to do it. But not only if there's a slight mitzvah, it's prohibited, but even a full mitzvah, it's still asur because of the rabbinic prohibition that's on it. We said, all of these that we said were asur on Yom Tov, and kol shkein l'Shabbos. Kal v'chomer l'Shabbos, which means that the laws of Shabbos and Yom Tov are equal. For a minute, there's probably supposed to be a chulu, because then it goes on, in ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos, aleichem nefesh b'levan. But I have a star over here. Yeah. There's a star on the side of my Gemara that says Tzarech liyos b'Yom Tov chulu v'koy akushya al ein bein Yom Tov l'Shabbos. I think that's referring to that the heading of this Gemara is off. The heading Kol Eila B'Yom Tov Amru. The heading should have been on Ein Bein Yom Tov L'Shabbos.
That's the last line.
Right. That's the last line of the Mishnah, and that's the introduction to this Gemara. That's what it's supposed to be. And now, Veramino, I'll ask you a contradiction. Contradiction is, I'm going to show you there's another difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos. Yeah. Yeah, I'm missing the word etc., which in Gemara would be v'chulu, is very important, because when you leave out, sometimes that's the main point is in that etc. So probably there's a missing v'chulu here, unless in your Gemaras it has it. For a minute, there's a contradiction. Mashil and derech haruv b'yom tov avlei b'Shabbos. You're allowed to lower down the grain that was drying on the roof. You're allowed to lower it into the house on Yom Tov, but you can't do it on Shabbos. See, there's a other halachas that are mutter on, even though it's not for food for today, it's just because of a loss. It's not eichel nefesh. And nevertheless, on Shabbos it was aser, and on Yom Tov it was mutter. Rav Yosef like kasha, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua. How do you answer a contradiction? You say either they're talking about two different cases, or you say it's a machlekes. So here we're going to choose the machlekes one. That's our answer. We say that Rabbi Eliezer is going to hold ein bein yom tov l'Shabbos aleichol nefesh, but Rabbi Yeshua is going to hold no, that there are other differences also. We're stricter on Shabbos than on Yom Tov. They're gonna. Oh, why? Yeah, why to come anonymous? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Just official lodging of
Against Rabbi. Okay, the Tanya. It was taught in the Beitza. I think the explanation for Rebbe is that Mishnayos what weren't written down. It's Machlekes Rashi and the Rambam. If Rebbe wrote the Mishnah, he edited the Mishnah. Possibly wrote it also, but he definitely edited it. Yeah. Ravashi, according to Rashi, yeah. Those are at the end of the Gemara, 300 years earlier. So it was edited, but all of this was memorized. All of the Mishnayos were memorized. So they had to fit, some of them were songs, and some of them were they had patterns, make it easy to remember. So he didn't like to adjust what was already part of the song, what was already part of the routine. Can you imagine if you had to switch a word in Ashrei or something? So he wouldn't add in another phrase or another opinion. He wanted to leave it the way it was, and that's why we have the Chesuri Mechsha, or he has a Mishnah and another something that we were supposed to do, but he just left it. That's also the Asmachtas. The psukim were clearer than the Mishnayos. That's why sometimes we use psukim, because that would help you memorize things also. Anyway, could be that Rebbe wrote it also. The Rambam writes clearly that Rebbe wrote it, but Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says that it was edited but not written. In the two versions of Reb Shira Gaon, we have the Spanish one and the French one. There's two manuscripts of Reb Shira Gaon, the letter from Reb Shira Gaon about the history of the Gemara. So in the Spanish one, it says that Rebbe wrote it. In the French one, it says that he edited it. And Rashi probably had the French one, and the Rambam had the Spanish one. So Reb Shira Gaon is before. Yeah, okay. The Tanya, yeah. Reb Shira Gaon. He lived in North Africa or something. And his letter was, he lived in Babylonia probably. He lived in Iraq, in Bavel. He wrote the letter to North Africa, to Kirwan. Yeah. He didn't get he didn't turn French. There were manuscripts that they found in France, and they had manuscripts that they found in Spain. The manuscripts were found. So which manuscript did Rashi have? Which manuscript did the Rambam have? Okay. I'm sorry.
When did you just ask him?
He passed away 200 years earlier. Okay. So we say it's machlekes. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shua. These are two students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. The Tanya, Oisives benai shenafel labar. A mother animal and a child animal that fell into a pit, and you want to get them out. So you can take them out because you can check them. The problem is you can't check them both because you can't check the mother animal and the child animal, baby animal, in the same day. So what do you do? So you lift up one animal, and then you shecht it. Well, now you're stuck. Other animal can't be shechted. He says that there's a gzeira. Obviously, we're dealing with Yom Tov because you can't shecht on Shabbos. So we're talking about Yom Tov. And he says that you have to put the food down into the pit so keep it alive.
Didn't we have this back earlier on?
Yeah.
We were learning about this.
We've had this before. I don't know where, but we've had it before.
A bit earlier, yeah.
So what Rabbi Eliezer
was talking about a bechor, and then there was marim that you take out the first one.
Yeah, that's where we quoted.
And that was about the pgam on the animal there. Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, sure.
Very good.
You're gonna stay off, Moshe.
So tell me again. No, Moshe was saying that when this was quoted before previously, it was in the discussion about a bechar, about the mum on the bechar. So to be myrim to. So anyway, Rabbi Eliezer seems to say that the laws of Yom Tov are just as strict as Shabbos, and you can't lift up this animal by saying that it could be a loss or it's maybe tzar balechayim. And Rabbi Shua that you bring up, Rabbi Shua has a different opinion. He says you bring up the first animal, say, oh, I'm going to shecht it. And then you don't shecht it. And then you bring up the second one. You say, I think I wanted the other one. And then you bring up the other one. Now they're both up. Now you shecht whichever one, and then you shecht whichever one you want. So once you have them both in front of you, then you make the decision. So Rabbi Yeshua is telling me that on Yom Tov I have leniencies that I wouldn't have said on Shabbos, which means that a hefsid, a loss of money, which that's what we saw by mashilin, by lowering down the grain, that was a loss, which on Yom Tov became permissible. You see over here, Rabbi Yeshua also says that a possible loss is permissible. Amalei Abaya says to Rabbi Yosef, it's his teacher, says to his teacher Rabbi Yosef, Mimai, how do you know that this is an accurate comparison to say that these Mishnayos actually belong to these authors? Dilma, maybe Rabbi Eliezer would really hold Mashilin also, that you're allowed to lower it down. Why over there didn't he say that you're allowed to lift up the other animal? Because you can put the food in. It will eat it. If it's hungry, it will eat it. But I don't have any way of salvaging the grain when it's going to get wet unless I lower it in. So maybe Rabbi Eliezer would agree to that. Notice we're dividing it up, saying that Mishnah is involved in a machlekes. Inami, or you can do the other way. Over there, Rabbi Yeshua allowed it because there was sort of a trick. He said, well, I want the other animal. The other animal looked like it would have been better for me. But over here, I don't have any trick. You have no way of saying why you're getting it into the house other than you're trying to save a loss. Rav Papa says you're right, it's a machlekes, but it's different. It's a different machlekes. It's a machlekes beishamai and beisel. The Tanan was taught in a Mishnah. Rav Papa is the student of Abaya and Rava, so it went from Rabbi Yosef to Abaya to Rav Papa. The Tanan, we have a Mishnah. We had it earlier. Beishamai Emrim Emitin Leisa Katan Leisa Lulav Leisa Sefer Torah L'Shus Rabbim. Beisil Matirin. Beishamai holds that carrying on Yom Tov is aser, unless it's food. Beisil says no, and that was based on the machlekes. It was like a very important machlekes. If we say the rule of mitaych shehutra letzayra chutra nami shalei letzayra, once the malacha becomes mutter for eichel nefesh, then you're allowed to do it for everything else. And carrying, what are you allowed to carry? So Beishamai holds only food. Beisil says you're allowed to carry anything you want because you're allowed to carry food. You can carry anything. Based on that, what Rav Papa wants to say is Dilma Laihi. Oh, 1 second. Before we get, so Beishamai says that Shabbos and Yom Tov would be the same. Ein bein Shabbos and Yom Tov ela eichel nefesh bulvad, literally. And Beisil says no. We have mitaych shehutra l'tzayrach. We have that Yom Tov is much more lenient than Shabbos, and therefore that would fit with Mashilin also, because we do have extra leniencies on Yom Tov. It's not just specifically eichel nefesh. Okay.
This is the case of the Tesha to they're talking about where they become never instituted in the first place, the degree of itself, or is it they said, you know what, for this you can take out that here.
The category of eichel nefesh will not just discuss the heter of eichel nefesh, which is the Torah heter, right? Melechas avoda leisasu. So once that malacha becomes mutter, Beisil said mutter because of eichel nefesh, that category, that whole category is deleted. So there's 39 malachas, but the eichel nefesh ones get deleted, like baking and this, and they actually drop out of the. It's is eichel nefesh, because Haitzah is eichel nefesh in certain cases, so then it gets deleted. And remove the malacha, yeah. Well, the example that we gave when we learned this was that you're allowed to kill a mosquito because I'm allowed to shech. You know what I'm saying? It's like it becomes. That's not the way we do it, but theoretically, it has to be a tzarech. There's a bamed dvarim amurim. There's a bunch of bamed dvarim. Now the Gemara says, just what we did to Rabbi Yosef, now the Gemara is doing to Rav Papa. It says, how do you know that this is an accurate match, that the Machlekes Beishamai and Beisil is going to be the opinions of these Mishnayos? Over there, we're talking about tiltal. Now, tiltal is muktzah. Now, originally when we learned this Gemara, we weren't saying that the grain was muktzah. We were saying that the grain was a tircha. But apparently, there's also this other issue of muktzah. Maybe Beishamai never spoke about muktzah. Maybe Beishamai just said that haitzah is aser, but over there you weren't doing haitzah. You were just moving something. The Gemara says, 1 second. Where do you get the laws of muktzah? The laws of muktzah was based on that all the problem was people were carrying. So they stopped. They said you can't touch any items, and then they said no, kalim you can. They said, but it was all based on the laws of carrying. So if you're not allowed to carry, then you'll have the laws of muktzah. If you are allowed to carry, then you don't have the hilchos muktzah. That was a division we made earlier. So it will fit with Beishamai by saying that Beishamai has muktzah on Yom Tov, and Beis Hillel would have it more relaxed, and therefore you should be allowed to do this, to lower it down. That's what it seems. Okay, we have a new Mishnah. Habehema v'akelim, animals and utensils, karagli abaylim. When we talk about the tchum, how far a person is allowed to walk on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, so the owner of these utensils and the owner of that animal has a 2,000 amma limit to each direction. So too, his animals also have the 2,000 amma limit outside the city. So outside of the city. So you can't just say, oh, you set up an Erev to that side. Would you mind taking this to my relative over there because you made an Erev? No, if it's your items, your kalim, and your animal, then no one else can move it because it has your same restrictions. If someone gives his animal to a son or to a shepherd, it doesn't go over. If we're talking about it gives it over on Yom Tov. Why? Because when Shabbos, when Yom Tov came in, it already had those restrictions. Let's say there's a few brothers in the house. Each one has his own kalim, their own size clothing. Harela Karaglov, it follows whichever the owner is. But let's say Shein Miyuchadim. Let's say it's just I don't know, a poncho, raincoat that doesn't go by size, just one size fits all. So then Harela Kamakam Shaholchim. Now this becomes complicated. If they made Erevin to different directions, then this one size fits all item cannot go anywhere, because if it was one is 2,000 amas that way, one's 2,000 amas that way, it's restricted to stay right here, or possibly wherever it is. But you have to satisfy everyone's Erev. The Erev was where they walked outside the city and they put food, and then they could walk 2,000 amas past that. If you borrow a keli on Erev Yom Tov, Karagle Ashayel, it goes after the feet of the borrower. Be Yom Tov. But if you borrowed it on Yom Tov, so Yom Tov came in and it was at the lender's, in the lender's house, then it's Karagle Amashal. Then it stays as Yom Tov came in. Let's say a woman borrows ingredients from neighbors, and she borrows spices and water and salt for her dough. Those items, those ingredients that she borrowed also have limits on them, how far they're allowed to go. And now this concoction that she made now has limitations on where it can go based on the different ingredients that are in there. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, water is not an issue, because water is not even visible, so it's not counted. Shaila over here is, why isn't those things batal? Probably the answer is because davar sheish l'matirin is like batal. After Yom Tov you can move it, or maybe there's other things. Sorry?
Even food on Yom Tov has limits.
Yeah, that's what we're learning. So let's just do the first piece of Gemara. Masnisin, the like Rab Daisa. The Mishnah doesn't fit with Rab Daisa. The Tanya, because we have a Brisa where we have Rab Daisa's opinion. Rab Daisa Aimer. Va'amrila Abashal Aimer. Some say it's Abashal. Halakech behema mechaveira Erev Yom Tov. Someone buys an animal on Erev Yom Tov. It follows, even though he only got it on Yom Tov, it follows the possession of the purchaser. Look at what's going on here. You give the animal to the shepherd. It belongs to it. It follows the feet of the shepherd, not the owner. The shepherd. Now our Mishnah said it's the owner, even though you're giving it on Yom Tov. Our Mishnah sounded correct, because when Yom Tov came in, it was in the hands of the owner. During the day, the shepherd takes it. So the Gemara says, it's not really a contradiction, because it has to do with the scenario. Because you see, if there's only one shepherd in the town, so then when Yom Tov came in, you knew that the shepherd's gonna go take this animal out to graze. He would walk around and take all the animals out, and they have to eat on Yom Tov, so they would go out to graze. So this shepherd was part of your thoughts originally when Yom Tov came in. But in our Mishnah, there were two shepherds. We don't know which one you're going to give it to, so therefore we can't attribute every shepherd in the town all his because it has nothing to do with him. You're never going to give it to that one, and we don't know which one. So that also makes sense, because in the Mishnah it said if he gives it to his son or to his shepherd, it sounds like that there could have been options there, and that's why it's by the feet of the owner, not by the shepherd. Shmamina. Amar Okay, let's leave it over there.
Good job. Good job. Good job, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you very much.